I never imagined that the people I called family would betray me at the lowest moment of my life. But nothing could have prepared me for what they did, celebrating while my daughter was being buried. My name is Chloe, and I used to believe that family was supposed to be there for you, especially when you needed them most. I learned the hard way that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who will hurt you the worst. A year ago, my life was almost perfect. I had a loving husband, Daniel, and our beautiful 5-year-old daughter, Lily. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Daniel worked as an engineer, and I was a pediatric nurse. We had a small but cozy home, and most importantly, we had each other. Then, everything changed in an instant. Daniel died in a tragic accident on his way home from work. A reckless driver ran a red light, and in a blink, the life we built together was shattered. I remember getting the call, the way my knees buckled, the way the world seemed to blur as the officer's words echoed in my ears. Lily was too young to understand at first. She kept asking when Daddy would come home. I told her he was in heaven, watching over us. But how do you explain to a child that the person she loves most will never walk through the front door again? As if losing Daniel wasn't enough, I soon found myself fighting another battle, one I never expected. Daniel had a life insurance policy, one he made sure to update just months before he passed. He always said, "No matter what happens, I want you and Lily to be safe." That money was meant to help us survive, to cover Lily's future, our home, and any unexpected hardships. I didn't expect to need it so soon, but it became our only safety net. At first, my family was supportive. My mother helped with Lily while I struggled to hold myself together. My older sister, Evelyn, who had always been the golden child, showed up more often than usual. At first, I thought she was being kind, but I should have known better. One evening, a month after Daniel's funeral, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table, the same one where we had countless family dinners. She poured me a cup of tea, her face set with a serious expression. "We need to talk about the insurance money," she said. I frowned. "What about it?" She exchanged a glance with Evelyn, who was perched on the couch, arms crossed. "Your sister has been struggling financially. Her rent is ridiculous, and her job barely pays enough for her to get by. We were thinking, maybe you could help her out?" I stared at them, stunned. "You're asking me to give Evelyn part of Daniel's life insurance? It's not like you need all of it." Evelyn chimed in, her voice casual, as if she were discussing the weather. "You have the house, your job, and let's be honest, Chloe, you've always been lucky." I felt my stomach churn. Lucky? My husband was dead. I was raising our daughter alone. And now they wanted me to hand over the only financial security we had? "No," I said firmly. "That money is for Lily. For her future." My mother sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "Family helps each other, Chloe. Think about Evelyn. She's always had a harder time than you." I pushed my chair back. "I can't believe this. Daniel left that money for us. It's not up for discussion." Evelyn scoffed. "Wow, selfish as ever." I walked away, thinking that was the end of it. I should have known better. 2 weeks later, I logged into my bank account and nearly stopped breathing. The money was gone. Every last cent of Daniel's life insurance payout had been transferred out. Panic set in. I called the bank, thinking it was fraud, a mistake. But then I saw the name on the transfer record. Evelyn. My own sister had stolen my husband's life insurance money. I called her, my hands shaking. The moment she answered, I exploded. "You stole from me? From Lily?" Evelyn didn't even try to deny it. "It's not stealing if it's family, Chloe. You'll be fine. I needed it more." I was shaking with rage. "Give it back, now." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, that's not happening. The money's already been spent. You'll get over it." I was still trying to process the betrayal when she dropped the final bombshell. "Oh, and by the way, I'm hosting a housewarming party next Saturday. You should come. You know, celebrate with me." I froze. "A housewarming party? With my money?" She sighed as if I were an inconvenience. "It's not just your money. And don't be dramatic. It's already planned, and Mom is helping me set up. You should really stop being so bitter." I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Then she said the words that made my blood run cold. "Besides, it's not like you have anything better to do that day. Lily's funeral is in the morning, right? You'll be free by evening." The world seemed to tilt around me. I could barely hear my own heartbeat over the ringing in my ears. My daughter was about to be laid to rest, and my sister, the woman who stole everything from me, was throwing a party on the same day. I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My vision blurred, but through my grief, through my agony, something else began to rise. Rage. If Evelyn thought she could do this to me and walk away unscathed, she was dead wrong. I should have known they would turn against me, but nothing could have prepared me for the cruelty that followed. After discovering that my sister Evelyn had drained my husband's life insurance money, the money meant for my daughter's future, I thought I had reached my breaking point. I was wrong. The real betrayal was still to come. Lily's health had been fragile for months. It started with fatigue, then the bruises, the weight loss. I took her to the doctor, hoping it was nothing. But deep down, I already knew. The day I sat in the doctor's office, gripping the edge of my chair, felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "I'm sorry, Chloe," Dr. Patel said gently, sliding the test results across the desk. "Lily has acute leukemia. It's aggressive. We need to start treatment immediately." The words felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to fight back against the universe itself. But there was no time. I had to be strong for her. Chemotherapy. Long nights in the hospital. Watching my little girl, once full of life, shrink into a frail shell of herself. Through it all, I held her hand, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "You're going to get better, sweetheart," I told her, forcing a smile as I tucked a blanket around her tiny frame. "Mommy's right here." I had hoped, prayed that Evelyn, my mother, my so-called family would stand by me. But they were too busy celebrating Evelyn's new house. She was flaunting it everywhere, posting pictures on social media, inviting everyone she knew to her big event. My mother even sent a message in our family group chat, gushing about how proud she was of Evelyn's accomplishments. Accomplishments? She stole from me, from Lily, and now she was being rewarded for it. I confronted my mother a week before the funeral, desperate for some kind of support. "Lily is sick, Mom. I need help. Just, please, come see her." She sighed, barely looking up from her phone. "Chloe, you need to stop making everything about you. We're all dealing with things." I felt my stomach twist. "Are you serious?" "Look," she said, annoyed now. "Evelyn has been under so much stress, trying to get the house in order. You should be happy for her." "Happy?" I let out a hollow laugh. "Lily is fighting for her life, and you're worried about Evelyn's stress?" She frowned. "Chloe, we all have to move on at some point. You can't just—" I cut her off. "Move on? My daughter is dying." There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought, hoped, that something in her expression would soften, that she would remember she was a mother too. Instead, she rolled her eyes. "You've always been dramatic." I walked out, my heart pounding with something worse than grief. Rage. The day Lily passed away, the world should have stopped. But it didn't. I remember sitting by her hospital bed, holding her tiny hand, whispering, "I love you. over and over again, as if saying it enough times could bring her back. The machines beeped. Nurses moved around us. Somewhere in the distance, life carried on. But for me, it ended right there with her last breath. I don't remember much of what happened after. The funeral arrangements, the condolences, the way the world blurred together into a haze of sorrow. What I do remember is Evelyn's response when I sent her the message. Me. Lily passed away. The funeral is in 3 days. Evelyn. Okay. That was it. No condolences, no sorrow. Just one word. Lowercase. Like an afterthought. And then came the final, unforgivable blow. The night before the funeral, my mother called. Listen, sweetheart, we won't be able to make it tomorrow. I gripped the phone. What? She hesitated for only a second before saying, Evelyn's housewarming party is that day. We already invited people and it's too late to change plans. I almost dropped the phone. You're skipping your granddaughter's funeral. For a party? There was a long pause. Then, with a sigh, she said, Chloe, you have to understand. Life goes on. I felt my body go numb. Life goes on. Life went on for them. For Evelyn. For my mother. While I was preparing to lay my little girl to rest, they were picking out wine and party decorations. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just hung up. I sat in my empty house, staring at Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit, still resting on the couch where she used to cuddle it. And in that moment, the grief, the betrayal, the rage, everything inside me hardened into something cold. This wasn't just cruelty. This wasn't just selfishness. This was war. And Evelyn? She was about to learn exactly what happens when you push someone too far. I didn't just want revenge. I needed it. Lily's funeral was a blur of black-clad figures and whispered condolences. The cemetery was quiet, the air thick with grief. But my mind was somewhere else. While I stood by my daughter's grave, staring at the cold, unfeeling earth that had swallowed my baby whole, my mother and Evelyn were laughing, drinking, celebrating. I couldn't accept it. I wouldn't accept it. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in my dark living room. Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit lay abandoned on the couch. I picked it up, holding it against my chest, and then I started planning. The first step was destroying Evelyn's precious party. She had flaunted the event all over social media. Lavish decorations, a catered dinner, a guest list full of people who, until now, probably thought she was a respectable person. She had stolen from me, from Lily, and now she was parading around in a house she bought with blood money. I wouldn't let her enjoy it. At exactly 6 p.m., the height of her little gathering, I made my move. The first call was to the police. There are intruders in my property, I said, my voice steady. I need officers at this address immediately. The house was still legally mine. Evelyn had the keys, but she didn't have the paperwork. She was throwing a party in a house she had no legal claim to. The second call was to my lawyer. I want to ensure the deed remains in my name, I told him. If she tries anything, shut it down. Then I drove to the house myself. By the time I arrived, the police were already there. I could hear the music thumping, see the glow of expensive string lights illuminating the backyard. Inside, through the large windows, people were drinking, laughing, completely oblivious to what was coming. Then the music cut out. The front doors swung open, and a pair of officers stepped inside. Confusion spread like wildfire. This property is not legally owned by the current occupant, one officer announced. You are all trespassing. Guests started murmuring, shifting uncomfortably. I could already see people pulling out their phones, whispering to each other. Evelyn stormed forward, her face red with anger. What the hell is going on? She snapped. The officer held up a document. This house is legally owned by Chloe Peterson. Do you have any paperwork proving otherwise? Evelyn's face twisted in fury. She turned toward me, eyes blazing. "You gave this to me." I stepped forward, keeping my voice calm. "Show me the deed with your name on it." She faltered. Her guests were staring, murmuring. There was no deed. There was no proof. Because she had nothing. People started leaving. One by one, her friends, colleagues, and business contacts slipped away, unwilling to be involved in a legal dispute. The expensive catered food sat untouched. The decorations, the music, the carefully curated atmosphere, all ruined. But I wasn't done. As the last guests filed out, I leaned in close, my voice barely above a whisper. This was just the beginning. Her eyes widened slightly. For the first time, I saw it. Fear. And then, like clockwork, the twist hit. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I glanced down. One sentence. "You're not the only one who wants Evelyn to pay." I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. Someone else was after her? I looked up at Evelyn, who was still seething with rage. She had no idea that the walls were closing in, and I had no idea who had just entered the game. "Comment the number 1 if you want to see how Evelyn will pay for this." Evelyn thought she had won. Even after I ruined her housewarming party, even after the police shut everything down, she still walked around like she was untouchable. Like she would always land on her feet, no matter how much destruction she left in her wake. But she had no idea what was coming. The message I received, "You're not the only one who wants Evelyn to pay," stayed on my mind. Someone else was after her. Someone who wanted revenge just as much as I did. I had to find out who. It didn't take long. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, heart pounding. "She stole from you too, didn't she?" A man's voice said. I didn't recognize it. "Who is this?" A pause. Then, "David." The name didn't ring a bell, but his next words did. I was engaged to Evelyn. My breath caught in my throat. Evelyn had been engaged once, years ago. It ended abruptly, and she never talked about it. "She drained my savings," David continued. "Wiped me out. She convinced me to invest in a fake business deal, then disappeared when it fell apart. I lost everything." My stomach twisted. Evelyn had always been selfish. But this? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because she's about to do it again." David had been watching her. He knew Evelyn was desperate. Losing the house meant losing her leverage. She needed money fast, and she was already setting up another scam, this time targeting a wealthy businessman named James Carter. "She's spinning the same lies she told me," David explained. "I bet she's already asked him for an investment opportunity." That's when an idea took root in my mind. Evelyn ruined lives by taking everything from people who trusted her. It was time for her to trust the wrong person. I reached out to James Carter myself. It wasn't hard. He was a public figure, known for his real estate empire. I sent him an anonymous email with a single sentence. "Before you invest in Evelyn, ask David Turner what happened to him." 2 days later, I got my answer. Evelyn showed up at a high-profile investors' gala, one she had begged James to take her to, only to be publicly exposed. James had done his homework. Right there, in front of his business associates, he called Evelyn out. "You tried to scam me," he said loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Just like you scammed David Turner." I wasn't there, but I wish I had been. Evelyn tried to deny it, tried to charm her way out like she always did. But James had proof. Emails, bank records, testimonies. By the time the night was over, Evelyn wasn't just humiliated. She was finished. But that wasn't the best part. After the public exposure, Evelyn spiraled. She lost access to all the high-profile circles she had carefully inserted herself into. Then came the legal trouble. James wasn't just angry. He pressed charges. So did David. Fraud. Theft. identity manipulation, the case against her piled up. And then, the final twist. The house she stole from me? She had taken out an illegal loan against it. She had tried to use property she didn't even own to get money. And now, the bank was coming for her. Evelyn had nothing left. I sat in my car, watching from a distance as the sheriff posted an eviction notice on her door. She stumbled onto the porch, still in her designer dress, staring at the paper like she couldn't believe this was happening. I rolled down my window. She turned. Our eyes met. She knew. She knew I was behind this. I smiled. Then I drove away. Evelyn had spent her whole life taking from others, but now she had nothing left. The day of her eviction, she stood outside the house she had stolen from me, clutching a suitcase filled with whatever she could salvage. The once pristine property, the one she had bragged about, thrown lavish parties in, and used to climb the social ladder, was no longer hers. She looked around desperately, waiting for someone to come to her rescue. But there was no one. James Carter had destroyed her reputation in business circles. David had ensured she would never con another man again. And I had taken back everything she stole. She had burned every bridge. Even our mother, her biggest enabler, had finally turned her back. When Evelyn called, begging for a place to stay, our mother's response was simple. You made your bed. Now lie in it. I thought that was the end of it, that Evelyn would disappear, finally facing the consequences of her own actions. But she still had one more mistake to make. 1 week later, I got a call from my lawyer. She tried to access your accounts, he said. Again? I almost laughed. Evelyn had already lost the house, the money, and her connections, and now she was trying to steal from me one last time. I didn't stop it. Instead, I let her dig her own grave. With the help of my lawyer and the police, we set a trap. I left just enough in an account under my name, an account we flagged for fraud. The moment Evelyn attempted to transfer money, the authorities were alerted. They caught her red-handed. The officers arrived at the rundown motel where she was staying, arresting her on the spot. Fraud, identity theft, bank fraud. This time, she wasn't walking away. At her trial, she sat in the courtroom, a shell of the woman she used to be. The confident, manipulative sister I had known was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood that she had no control left. When the judge handed down her sentence, I felt nothing but satisfaction. 5 years. That was what she got. 5 years behind bars. For all the money she stole, all the lives she ruined, it still didn't feel like enough. But it was justice. As the guards led her away, she turned to look at me, eyes burning with hatred. You think you've won? She spat. I tilted my head, watching her with calm detachment. No, Evelyn, I said softly. I just made sure you finally lost. She screamed something as they dragged her away, but I didn't care enough to listen. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I stood outside, feeling the sunlight on my skin, finally free from the weight of Evelyn's betrayals. I had spent so much time fighting, surviving, seeking justice. But now I could live. I walked to Lily's grave that afternoon, placing a small bouquet of daisies, the same flowers she used to love. I did it, sweetheart, I whispered, running my fingers over her name. She can't hurt anyone anymore. I sat there for a long time, letting the wind carry away the last remnants of my anger. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had closure. And Evelyn? She had exactly what she deserved. Comment the number 1 if you think Evelyn got what was coming, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.